Imagine buying your dream car, a brand new 2025 Mercedes-Benz CLE 53, only for your HOA neighbor to demand you hand over the keys so her son can show off at prom. When Martin, a black man, said no, Susan declared him the enemy of the neighborhood, buried him in fake fines, and even called the cops to try and ruin him. Martin had always known Susan was unstable, drunk on the flimsy power handed to her by the HOA. But he never realized just how far she was willing to go. Susan strutted through the neighborhood like she wore a crown, swinging her clipboard like it was a royal scepter. Most neighbors scattered the second she appeared, ducking inside to avoid her. But Martin? As a black man who had fought too hard for his peace, Martin wasn't built to bow to nonsense. He thought he could keep his distance and stay unbothered. That illusion collapsed the day Martin's brand new car rolled into his driveway. Welcome to Prodigy Tales. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more HOA chaos. The spark was Martin's car, a 2025 Mercedes-Benz CLE 53, a blazing red beast with sleek aerodynamic curves and a turbocharged growl that turned heads every time it came alive. Martin had worked for years to earn that machine, saving every penny, skipping vacations, living on cheap noodles, hustling side jobs, until the day he could finally call it his own. That CLE 53 wasn't just transportation, it was Martin's trophy, a declaration that his hard work had paid off. Martin treated it like treasure. He waxed the paint until it gleamed like glass, parked it at the perfect angle so the sun bounced off its crimson body, and even installed a camera system just in case anyone dared mess with it. What Martin didn't know was that the greatest threat wasn't thieves or vandals. It was Susan, the self-proclaimed queen of the block. The moment Susan laid eyes on Martin pulling up, her stare sharpened like a hawk zeroing in on prey. Her face twisted into a sour glare she didn't even bother hiding. It was like Martin could hear her mind turning gears, scheming a way to ruin what he had earned. The Mercedes wasn't even in park before Susan stormed across the street, sandals smacking against the pavement like war drums. Her red visor tilted low, oversized sunglasses reflecting the CLE 53, and that stiff fake smile stretched across her face like cheap wallpaper. Martin leaned casually on the hood, protective pride radiating from him. Susan opened her mouth with her first shot of venom disguised as small talk. "Nice car," she said, voice sugar-coated with envy. "Must be hard to keep something that flashy in a neighborhood like this." That was only her opening move. Martin should have known it was just the beginning. The very next day, Susan was back, this time pretending to play the role of the neighborhood's welcome committee. Martin heard the knock at his door and opened it to find her standing there with a tray of cookies. Not homemade, store-bought, still wearing the price tag on the side of the plastic container. "Congratulations on your new ride," Susan said, her lips twitching as if she had swallowed something sour. Martin accepted the cookies, though he already knew better. If Susan was acting nice, there was always poison baked somewhere into the gesture. She never showed up without an agenda. Sure enough, after a couple of awkward compliments and a laugh that sounded faker than the cookies looked, she dropped her real reason for being there. "My son is a huge car enthusiast," she said sweetly. "Prom is next Friday. He needs to make a grand entrance. I was thinking you could let him take your Mercedes for the night." Martin nearly choked on his own breath. He stared at her in disbelief. Susan was asking him to hand over his 2-week-old 2025 Mercedes-Benz CLE 53, his pride, his trophy, the car he had sacrificed so much for, so her spoiled son could cosplay Fast and Furious at a high school dance. That car wasn't a toy. It was the product of years of blood, sweat, and hustle wrapped in polished metal. Martin looked her in the eye and gave his answer in a single sharp syllable: "No." That was all it took for Susan's entire face to morph. The fake smile vanished. Her nostrils flared wide, like an angry bull. Her tone pitched higher, sharp with outrage. "What do you mean, no?" she barked. "Nobody says no to me. You'll think about it and come back with the right answer. Got it?" Have you ever dealt with someone who thought the whole world revolved around them? What would you do if your neighbor tried to bully you into handing over your dream car? Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where our viewers are tuning in from. And If you believe in standing your ground against bullies, smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc because some battles aren't about cars at all. They're about refusing to bow to arrogance. With that, Susan spun around so fast she nearly tripped over her sandals, storming off Martin's porch like she owned it. Martin stood there holding the cookie tray, laughing so hard he almost dropped it. The sheer audacity left him stunned. 2 weeks after buying his dream car, this woman thought she could demand the keys like it was her personal rental service. But Martin knew something else about Susan. She never let things slide. She always escalated. And judging by the way she stomped away, Martin knew the battle had only just begun. Martin knew Susan wasn't going to just walk away. A few days later, he opened his mailbox and found a letter stamped with the HOA's letterhead, like it was some official government document. The words made him laugh out loud. Failure to comply with community requests marks you as an enemy of the neighborhood. Enemy of the neighborhood? Martin shook his head. What was this? Some kind of Cold War HOA edition? He crumpled the paper and tossed it aside, but deep down he knew this was just her first shot. And sure enough, the following week the fines began to roll in. Susan started slapping Martin with bogus violations. 20 a day for failure to comply with community spirit. Community spirit? Since when did refusing to loan out his Mercedes-Benz CLE 53 become a spiritual crime? Day after day, envelopes stuffed with invoices piled up in Martin's mailbox, numbers stacked higher than Monopoly money. By the time prom night had come and gone, Susan's son had probably shown up in a rented minivan, but still the fake fines kept piling. Martin ignored every single one. Why? Because part of him wanted this fight. Susan thrived when she bullied people one-on-one, cornering them in private where they had no backup. But Martin knew if she pushed far enough, her nonsense would spill out into the open, where everyone could finally see the madness for themselves. And he was ready for that day. It didn't take long. Another letter appeared on his doorstep, written in bold letters like a threat. Failure to settle your outstanding debt will result in law enforcement involvement within 48 hours. That was the moment Martin smiled. Wide. This was exactly what he wanted. If she really called the cops over her fake fines, the entire neighborhood would witness just how far off the rails Susan had gone. 2 days reached then. Martin heard the furious stomp of sandals smacking against his driveway. He looked out the window and saw Susan charging up, her face red, her clipboard trembling in her hand like it was about to snap in two. She pounded on Martin's door so hard he thought her acrylic nails might break. When Martin opened the door, Susan wasted no time. Her face was twisted with fury, spit flying as she shrieked. "You've refused to pay. You've refused to respect authority. I'll make an example out of you. You don't know who you're dealing with." Her voice was so high-pitched it could have shattered glass. Then, right there on Martin's porch, she whipped out her phone and dialed. Instantly, her tone flipped from banshee to sugary sweet. "Yes, I need officers immediately," Susan said into the receiver, smiling smugly. "One of my residents is violating HOA law and refusing to comply." Martin leaned back against the doorway, arms folded across his chest. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. The police arrived quicker than expected, red and blue lights flashing against Susan's visor as she stood proudly at the edge of his driveway. She looked like a queen about to knight her soldiers, already rehearsing her victory speech. "Finally," she muttered to herself, smirking, "someone's going to teach you respect." The officers stepped out, calm and measured. Susan ran toward them like an overexcited cheerleader, waving her clipboard as though it were a sacred text. "Officers! He's been refusing to pay fines, breaking HOA rules, disturbing the harmony of this neighborhood. You need to arrest him at once." The cops exchanged a glance, then looked back at Martin. One of them raised an eyebrow. "Arrest him for unpaid HOA fines?" Susan's voice cracked as she doubled down. "Yes, he owes hundreds because he refused to lend my son his car for prom. He has no respect for authority, for the community, for me." Martin finally stepped forward, calm and collected. He explained everything. How Susan had tried to bully him into handing over his 2025 Mercedes-Benz CLE 53, how she declared him the enemy of the neighborhood, how she'd been manufacturing fake fines just to pressure him. Then Martin pulled out the stack of letters he'd saved in a neat folder, proof of her harassment. The officers flipped through the pages, their lips twitching as they tried not to laugh. One pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, none of this is enforceable by law. You've wasted police resources because your neighbor wouldn't loan you his car." Susan's smug grin vanished the moment the officer said those words. Her eyes widened, her voice shaking as she tried to claw her authority back. "What? No, you don't understand. I run this neighborhood," she sputtered. But the second officer cut her off, his tone sharp. "What you did was file a false report and misuse emergency services. That carries a hefty penalty, $1,500 minimum." The sound Susan made in response was almost inhuman, half screech, half dying goose. By now, neighbors had started pouring out of their homes, phones out, recording every second of her public meltdown. Susan stomped in circles, shouting, waving her arms, insisting the officers didn't know who she was. But the cops ignored her protests, calmly writing up the ticket right there in Martin's driveway. The moment they handed it over, laughter erupted up and down the block. Martin stood at the center of it all, arms crossed, watching with quiet satisfaction as justice landed on Susan like a hammer. For once, she wasn't the one humiliating others. She was the spectacle, the punchline. By the end of the week, the HOA board held an emergency vote. The result? Susan was stripped of her self-appointed crown. No more clipboard parades. No more fake fines. No more strutting around like she was queen of the block. Susan had been dethroned, humiliated, reduced to nothing but a neighborhood joke. Martin, meanwhile, went back to polishing his 2025 Mercedes-Benz CLE 53, sunlight bouncing off its crimson paint like a spotlight. This time, though, he didn't just see it as his dream car. It had become a symbol, a reminder that standing firm against bullies was always worth it. The battle was over. The so-called queen had fallen, and Martin had won without even breaking a sweat. If you believe that standing up to bullies is always worth it in the end, smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc, because some crowns were never real to begin with.